Welcome, history enthusiasts. Today we uncover the tragic and devastating fall of the Roman Republic. 23 relentless strikes of cold steel were meant to save a dying democracy from absolute rule. But this desperate act of ultimate betrayal truly ignited a devastating and endless civil conflict. Let us step inside the deeply shadowed halls of the Senate on the fateful Ides of March, 44 BC. Watch closely how the sudden demise of one powerful dictator gave birth to a highly ruthless empire. Rome, the eternal city, basks warmly in the golden glory of its absolute ruler, Julius Caesar. He has just been declared dictator for life, holding entirely unprecedented power over the Republic. Ancient historians note that he proudly wears the purple toga, a timeless symbol of ancient Roman kings. The cheering masses flood the city streets, reaching out to touch the great man who gave them cheap and plentiful bread. Caesar strides forward with the immense, unshakable confidence of a veteran who has never lost a war. His golden laurel wreath gleams brightly under the Mediterranean sun, masking his noticeably bald head. To the poor, he is a noble savior. To the elite, he represents a terrifying threat to tradition. The great Roman Republic has proudly stood without a single king for nearly 5 long and glorious centuries. The senators watch quietly from the shadows, their hearts filled with a toxic mix of fear and deeply rooted pride. They firmly believe that one man holding all the supreme power will completely destroy their democratic heritage. Dangerous whispers of treason begin to echo softly through the grand marble halls of the ancient capital. Secret meetings are held in the dead of night, plotting the unthinkable and highly tragic demise of a living god. The conspirators call themselves the Liberators, swearing a sacred oath to restore freedom to the Senate. Over 60 wealthy aristocrats willingly bind themselves to a deeply dangerous and purely shadowy pact. Historical records state they carefully chose the Ides of March for their final, overwhelmingly devastating strike. As the fateful morning finally arrives, dark omens and strange warnings seem to fill the heavy Roman air. Caesar boldly ignores the desperate pleas of his wife, trusting entirely in his own absolute invincibility. He steps confidently into his litter, carried by loyal slaves through the bustling and highly chaotic city streets. The towering Curia of Pompey looms menacingly ahead, its cold stone pillars waiting silently in the shadows. Inside, the air is thick with heavy tension. The senators wait patiently, hiding sharp daggers in their white togas. Marcus Junius Brutus stands very quietly in the corner, heavy, nervous sweat dripping slowly from his tense forehead. He is Caesar's deeply trusted friend, perhaps even an illegitimate son, tearing his conflicted soul apart. Brutus truly and deeply loves Caesar, but he loves the sacred, timeless ideal of the Roman Republic far more. Gaius Cassius, the sharp-eyed and cunning mastermind, watches Brutus closely, ensuring his unyielding resolve. If you had to carefully choose between saving your best friend or your beloved country, what would you truly do? The heavy wooden doors creak open loudly. The mighty dictator enters the vast, beautifully semicircular hall. A sudden, incredibly chilling silence falls over the grand room as the most powerful man on the earth walks in. The fatal trap is now fully set. The invisible net of ultimate betrayal closes tightly around its unaware prey. Caesar slowly walks toward his ornate golden chair, completely unaware of the many sharp blades hidden nearby. The lighting in the vast hall is extremely dim, casting long, highly dramatic shadows across the polished marble floor. As he confidently takes his seat, a large group of senators quickly approaches him with a completely fake petition. They immediately crowd around his golden chair, deliberately blocking the clear view of the remaining politicians. Caesar looks slightly annoyed by this incredibly sudden and highly disrespectful breach of his personal space.
We demand a vote immediately.
He waves his hand very dismissively, urging the highly persistent senators to take a step back and patiently wait. But they press menacingly closer, their faces pale, and their heavy breathing fueled by nervous, racing adrenaline. Tullius Cimber fiercely grabs the shoulders of Caesar's royal purple toga, pulling it down with incredibly great force.
Why, this is pure violence!
Caesar shouts loudly, finally realizing the terrible, inescapable danger he is now in. The first cold blade flashes brightly in the dim light. Casca delivers a highly frantic strike towards Caesar's neck. Caesar blocks the incredibly clumsy strike with his bare arm, his finely tuned veteran instincts instantly kicking in. He aggressively grabs Casca's trembling wrist, fighting back with the sheer, undeniable strength of a hardened general. But the very first strike of ultimate betrayal has been cast, acting as a clear signal for the desperately waiting wolves. The fragile illusion of peace shatters entirely. The ancient Curia erupts into absolute and devastating chaos. Senators aggressively rush forward from all sides, their pristine white garments fluttering in the highly frantic struggle. Hidden weapons are swiftly drawn from secret folds, gleaming wickedly before aggressively falling upon the great leader. The desperate men are so completely frenzied that they accidentally strike each other in the frantic, chaotic confusion. Caesar fights incredibly desperately, twisting and turning to escape the relentless, closing steel. He is a legendary man who fully conquered Gaul, now fighting his final, deeply tragic battle in a highly cramped room. The heavy air is filled with the terrifying, chaotic sounds of tearing fabric, sharp, desperate gasps, and highly dull thuds. Dark, crimson stains rapidly begin to bloom across the pristine white marble and the once magnificent royal purple cloth. He desperately looks around for immediate help, but the innocent bystanders have completely frozen in pure, helpless terror. The relentless liberators strike down again and again, driven by a blinding, dangerous mix of patriotism and pure hate. Caesar's legendary strength begins to fade quickly, as heavy, tragic injuries multiply across his once invincible, aging body. He is forcefully pushed against the incredibly cold stone pedestal of the towering, majestic statue of his old rival, Pompey. Cassius delivers a highly devastating strike to his tired face, his cold, calculating eyes filled with triumphant malice. Fading incredibly rapidly, Caesar gasps desperately for air, still trying to bravely push away the blinding sea of sharp blades. Then, the highly violent and chaotic crowd parts for a brief, terrifying moment, revealing the one man he never expected. Marcus Junius Brutus steps slowly forward from the dark shadows, his pale face a tight mask of deeply profound agony. His pristine white toga is already deeply stained. He raises his gleaming weapon, pointing it directly at the fallen Caesar. Time seems to completely and entirely freeze as the mighty dictator locks his tired eyes with his truly beloved protege. Could you ever bring yourself to deliver the final, devastating blow against the very man who raised and protected you? Ancient historical texts carefully record that in this incredibly heartbreaking moment, Caesar simply stopped his fighting. The intense physical pain of his many wounds was absolutely nothing compared to the entirely crushing agony of betrayal. He stares deeply into Brutus's highly conflicted eyes, realizing that his very own son has joined the devastating betrayal. The once great and legendary general slowly lowers his defensive arms, completely surrendering to his deeply tragic fate. With his absolute last ounce of fading strength, Caesar pulls the crimson-stained folds of his royal toga over his tired face. He tragically chooses to depart this world in total darkness, hiding his final, silent tears and his highly vulnerable expression. Brutus ruthlessly drives his sharp blade heavily downward, delivering the ultimately devastating and truly final, tragic blow. Caesar's now entirely lifeless body collapses incredibly heavily onto the cold, unforgiving floor of the ancient Senate Hall. He falls tragically, directly at the towering base of Pompey's statue, as if paying a highly final debt to his fallen foe. The terrifying echoes of the highly brutal struggle slowly fade away, quickly replaced by an incredibly eerie, heavy silence. 23 fatal strikes have permanently and tragically ended the glorious life of the greatest Roman who ever lived. The conspirators stand quietly over the fallen corpse, their chests heaving, their trembling hands heavy with undeniable guilt. They look at each other in total, absolute shock, slowly realizing the sheer, unimaginable magnitude of what they have just done. Brutus proudly lifts his crimson weapon high into the dim, shadowy light, his pale eyes completely wide and hauntingly empty. He screams loudly and passionately for liberty, truly believing they have just saved the Republic from its certain, terrible doom. The frantic conspirators immediately rush out of the freezing Curia into the incredibly bright and entirely sunlit Roman streets. They wave their highly gleaming weapons incredibly high, shouting very loudly that the cruel and terrible tyrant has met his end. Brutus highly passionately calls out to the Roman citizens, promising a wonderfully restored and entirely glorious, lasting freedom. But the incredibly loyal people of Rome do not ever cheer or proudly celebrate this highly devastating political demise. Instead, a highly heavy, entirely suffocating silence falls rapidly over the incredibly bustling and completely chaotic forum. The Roman commoners stare in completely absolute horror at the undeniably guilty hands of the wealthy elite patricians. Caesar was a truly beloved and legendary hero to the poor, a great man who generously gave them wealth, land, and lasting dignity. They quickly realized the so-called liberators have not saved Rome, but merely vanquished its absolute greatest, noblest champion. Their deep fear very quickly turns into completely uncontrollable anger as the highly shocking news spreads rapidly through the city. The angry Roman plebeians immediately begin to gather, holding fiercely burning torches and loudly shouting for absolute vengeance. Violent and devastating riots quickly erupt across the capital, tearing relentlessly through the ancient Roman streets and markets. The conspirators are very quickly forced to flee the very city they entirely and foolishly thought they had just bravely rescued. They immediately leave behind a massive, highly dangerous power vacuum, completely and utterly shattering the very frail government. The sudden, highly tragic demise of one single dictator rapidly plunges the once great republic into completely endless darkness. Mark Antony, Caesar's highly loyal and trusted commander, very quickly seizes the golden moment to passionately rally the angry mob. He loudly reads Caesar's highly generous and final will, revealing that the great dictator left his massive wealth to the people. The deeply angry citizens quickly build a massive, highly blazing funeral pyre right in the very heart of the ancient Roman Forum. They completely burn down the ancient Senate House in a massive, blazing inferno of pure, devastating grief and entirely furious revenge. The highly fearful conspirators are relentlessly hunted down, forced to fight a completely brutal and entirely losing, devastating battle. Both Brutus and Cassius eventually, and tragically, face their highly devastating ends on the completely dusty and barren battlefields. They choose to willingly depart this world on their own terms, finally recognizing the bitter failure of their deeply tragic plot. But the entirely devastating and chaotic violence does not stop there. The Great Republic is already entirely broken beyond repair. 13 long, entirely devastating years of highly chaotic civil war completely ravage the entire ancient Mediterranean world. The once great Roman legions violently vanquish one another, turning the incredibly mighty empire into an entirely vast and silent graveyard. From the highly tragic ashes of this completely endless destruction, a brilliantly new, cunning, and entirely ruthless leader boldly rises up. Octavian, Caesar's highly ambitious and entirely young adopted heir, completely and ruthlessly eliminates all his remaining desperate rivals. He very slowly strips the entirely ancient Senate of its remaining highly fragile power, step by incredibly careful, completely silent step. The beloved republic that Brutus tragically died to bravely protect is entirely and very quietly buried under highly absolute rule. The highly victorious Octavian bravely crowns himself Augustus, becoming the very first entirely absolute emperor of the known world. He successfully creates a mighty dynasty that will firmly command the entire earth for hundreds of highly glorious and incredibly turbulent years. The highly revered and entirely ancient democratic traditions are completely and forever replaced by the heavily looming shadows of empire. The incredibly cold, hard irony of ancient history is truly devastating. The sharp weapons meant to end a tyrant merely birthed more kings. The 23 fatal strikes did not ever bring true freedom, but rather forged the incredibly heavy iron chains of absolute rule. The beautifully polished marble floors of the ancient Curia were eventually washed, but the heavy, dark stain of ultimate betrayal remained forever. The legendary, powerful ghost of Julius Caesar ultimately triumphed over the desperate men who so ruthlessly vanquished him on that highly fateful day. His glorious and unforgettable name became a truly timeless title of absolute authority, eternally echoing through the ancient, highly majestic halls of history. The highly tragic and devastating fall of the once mighty republic stands as a truly grim reminder of how devastating chaos often destroys great ideals. Brutus entirely and truly believed he was a completely noble patriot. Yet the relentless march of history so very often remembers him only as a tragic traitor. Was the mighty Caesar an entirely cruel tyrant, requiring immediate demise, or the truly only absolute savior of ancient Rome? Please bravely tell us below. If you truly and deeply enjoyed this highly dark, tragic journey, please generously like, share, and subscribe for more entirely epic and completely unforgettable history tales.